Okay, good evening. Let's call this meeting to order. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I'm very envious.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And let's begin tonight with public audience. What we do is allow for 5 minutes, but if 5 minutes isn't enough, I'm always glad to stay after or meet another time to discuss something more in depth. So would anyone like to speak tonight? Yes, please. And also just make sure to just sign your name so we get that for the minutes. Thanks.
Diane Nash, 5 Marywood.
Yeah, you're good there with the microphone. It's just to pick it up for the TV.
I usually have such a loud voice, most people stay quiet. I'm here this morning because though I am not sure-footed enough to be in the various woods at this time, some of my friends who have been walking in Onion Mountain and Belden and Ethel Walker Woods, but Onion Mountain in particular, have alerted us to the fact that there are lots of trees marked with orange bands, which usually means some active management is imminent. And with so much focus on the budget necessarily, it's possible that we could allow some devastating changes to take place in the forest while our attention is diverted. So questions need to be asked why the town has paid for a forest plan, excuse me, before discussion and input from the residents about what we want our forest to be. Why are we considering timber sales to provide dollars to manage a forest that should manage itself? And why are we keeping this forest with a management plan when I'm told there's a comprehensive plan in the stages, at least of thinking, for all of our open space in town? We conserve these forests as natural preserves, not just for the canopy of the trees, but for the entire ecology of the forest, the birds, the smallest of creatures and the large creatures. We didn't conserve them to be a park with all the trees nicely stand up and clearing underneath. Forests are different animals, so to speak. We must not permit the clearing of the trees until we have a clear input from all of the residents that paid a lot of money to preserve these woods. So because you're focused on the budgets, as you should be, I ask that at least now you forbid any cutting, any clearing, any plan to be implemented until you hear from all of the residents. So thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for coming down. Would anyone else? Let's go left to right. Helen, please.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see everyone. This is the first time, I think, that I address this board since its inauguration. So may I congratulate all of you, and with just a little bit of pride.
Thanks, Mom.
wish all of you well and success as you begin your tenure in the leadership to guide us through the transition of the Simsbury's new form of government. I also want to congratulate and welcome Ms. Capriola. She's our first town manager, and I extend to her the same wishes. The other reason I address you tonight is to announce it's time for another forum. Now, this forum is regarding our role as caretakers of our conserved natural lands. But first, just a little bit of background and a little history. We take such great pride in stating that our community is unique in many ways, but importantly in that just under 33% of our town is designated as conserved open space. It's comprised of some municipally conserved lands as well as that of the Simsbury Land Trust and of the state. I'll speak specifically tonight to our municipally held parcels. Some are gifts. They were from enlightened and generous citizens, and they actually began 100 years ago or more. Now, the rest has been set aside because the citizens of this town recognize the significance of conservation, and with hard work and considerable investment acted on this conviction of preserving our irreplaceable natural resources. But I respectfully caution that conserving our natural resources should never only be based on achieving certain area percentages, but always to be based by identifying the inherent value of each and collectively to the well-being of our earth and all of her living ecosystems. So we turn to the responsibility of stewardship of all of these lands, and to be a good and appropriate caretaker, we need to inform ourselves for that task. In April of 2017, we conducted the first forum for just that reason, to begin the process of becoming good stewards. It was titled, "The Future of Our Forest, Stewarding Our Lands Thoughtfully." The presentation was by Dr. Edward Faison, senior ecologist from Highstead Foundation. It's in Reading, Connecticut, dedicated to forest research. If you were unable to attend that forum, the presentation can be accessed on our town website on the home page of the Open Space Committee. And it's noted there as the Forest Stewardship Presentation. And I encourage all of you to read it. Now, the forum was co-sponsored by our town, by the Simsbury Land Trust, by the Farmington River Watershed Association, and the Canton Land Trust. It was well attended and enthusiastically received. Tonight, we are pleased to announce our next regional forum, to be held again in the program room of the Simsbury Library on Thursday, April 26th. You don't have to write it down. I have something to give to you tonight. So, now the title of our next forum is "The Planet, Our Forests, and Championship Trees." And it will be led by Eric Hammerling, the Executive Director of Connecticut Forests and Parks Association. And he was the former Executive Director of our Farmington River Watershed Association. Now, told you the title, and let me tell you about the participants. Dr. William Moomaw, Professor Emeritus of International Environmental Policy, the Fletcher School, Tufts University, and founding director, Center for International Environment and Resource Policy. Dr. Moomaw was the lead author of 5 reports that were issued by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The IPCC shared the Nobel Prize for its climate work in 2007. Dr. Moomaw will present data on the dynamic relationship between forests and the Earth's climate, with a focus on the forests of North America and New England. Also participating will be Robert Leverett, who is a recognized expert on old-growth forests and large trees. Recently, Mr. Leverett remeasured the Pinchot sycamore and has submitted it for consideration as a national champion. Mr. Leverett's stunning photos will showcase our Pinchot sycamore and some of the amazing trees and old-growth forests in the region, a very rare occurrence. So, I have the announcement for the next forum to share with you tonight, and I request that it be placed on the town website as well. It's been mailed to an extensive regional list, but I would like to invite the public that they are also welcome. So save the date, April 26th, and I will give you all the particulars, and you can each have your copy. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Thanks, Mom.
I didn't hear that last comment, but that's okay.
It was embarrassing when my mom came to my school. I couldn't imagine Board of Selectmen meeting.
I got a phone call last night at 11 o'clock saying, I need to see you tomorrow. I want to.
Yes, please.
My mom comes sometimes,
Susan.
but she doesn't.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, yes, I'm signing in. I'll also tell you, Susan Messino, 41 Madison Lane. I always try and come here with multiple things and devote 1 minute, 40 seconds to each. If I have 3 announcements, I think that'll time out perfectly. First thing I wanted to mention is I've been here about renewable energy before, that I know that some of the arguments with renewable energy are that we need to do something. And I really believe that we need to do the right thing. And the best things for renewable energy are solar thermal, geothermal, and on-site solar. Those don't take up our landscapes, they don't ruin any wildlife habitats, and we should do those energy strategies as aggressively as possible. The other issue that we all know was brought up many times at the Board of Selectmen is in Connecticut, there's very little local control over energy projects that are overseen by the Connecticut Siting Council. That is quite different from other states, including Massachusetts. And I wrote to John Hampton a few weeks ago saying maybe there could be legislation allowing local communities to decide what types of renewable energy projects they might want. It's a zoning issue. You could say you want a certain amount of energy, you want to say you want to have a certain buffer from homes, you might want to have a certain type, and that would give more kind of predictability for developers and towns in terms of what the community wants and what the developer feels the community would be open to. So I sent him a quick note about that, and I think he submitted something for consideration. It's a budget year, so I don't know if it'll go through, but I didn't know what you guys had in the works, so I didn't want to cross wires with any other efforts, so I just wanted to tell you that I put a little chess piece on the table about that. I don't know where it's going, I don't know where it is, but anyway. Second point, hazardous waste disposal. As you know, the Grange has been doing our electronics recycling twice a year. Our electronics recycling is, it's always the Sunday before Mother's Day, so it's May 12th. We'll be assisted once again by Boy Scout Troop 76. So if you come to Andy's Supermarket between 9 and 12 on May 12th, you'll have friendly Boy Scouts helping to get as much stuff as you bring properly disposed of. It's very quick and there's no line. We request a $10 donation, but it's optional for any amount of stuff that you bring. If you are impatient and you want to get rid of hazardous waste beforehand, you can go to the Farmington site on April 21st, and it's free, but there's usually a long line. So you have 2 opportunities to responsibly dispose of your hazardous waste. The third announcement, because I think I'm probably clocking in here right under the wire, is I would also like to say that we do have this upcoming open space management plan. And I know you'll probably be receiving a letter from the Conservation Commission about forest management. And I would just like to say that I really would encourage you to look at the big picture before doing anything. There's been a lot of public input. There's been expert letters submitted. I assume that the Conservation Commission report to you will reflect all of that. I know that there'll be more discussion about this issue. So thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks very much, Susan. Ferg? Oh, yeah, no, sure.
I just, Aaron, just because I'm piggybacking, Aaron Levitt-Smith, 7 Winter Green Lane. I'm also a member of the Planning Commission, so just wanted to say that. And we did a lot of work on our POCD. I want to say something to piggyback on what Helen and Sue and Diane said. I really do hope that the town takes a look at the information that's coming out of the forum, information of national experts, that we're not relying on one forester's opinion, that we're taking a look at many different opinions on what we mean in the POCD by management of our open space. And when we say management, we want, the POCD was meant to help guide us, but it was also meant to preserve the natural resources that we have in town. And so when I was snowshoeing yesterday through Ethel Walker Woods and was looking at the possibility of many of those trees coming down, it broke my heart. I go in there because I like the peace and the quiet and the trees and the forest. And I don't think I just hope the first selectman or the Board of Selectmen really takes a look at input from everybody and many experts in different fields before we go through and log our natural resources. When we took on the Ethel Walker Woods project, I don't think anybody had in mind that we would go in there and log that precious resource. It was really meant to preserve so that people and families and people from out of this town would be able to go in and take advantage of its beauty and natural resources. So that's, thank you.
Thanks very much, Erin. Ferg, please.
Ferg Jansen. Jansen is also the name of my sixth grandchild who was born on Wednesday. First name Jansen.
Congratulations.
Full advertisement, 7 pounds, 6 ounces in California. We're trying to get her to move back here because it costs a lot of money to keep going back and forth. Anyway.
We want pictures.
3 Fox Den. I want to speak briefly about tourism in Simsbury. Ms. Capriola and you people were given a letter about funding of the tourism center, which is in the basement of the chamber, and for some reason, last year it did not get the money, even though they have carried it on. But with this year, with the sculpture project, it's just an important thing that we have that resource. The tourism committee works very hard and does a lot of work, but they don't have a base. They don't carry brochures in their house. There's no get-to place. So I'd like you to really seriously consider it. It's not in the size of your budget. I mean, everybody says it's not a lot of money, and it's not a lot of money, but I'd like you to seriously consider that. The prep school families come in and other visitors to town, Bridge of Flowers, I'm involved with that, and I just think to have a go-to place, particularly this year with the statue, with 27 statues all over town. So I won't reiterate, you got the letter, and I'd like you to really take it to heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please.
Good evening, it's Dan Correa, 15 Billingsgate Drive. And I'd kind of like to piggyback on what Ferg just said, because with this statue program that we have, the plan we have for the summer, it would be, I think, difficult if we're in the business of trying to attract people to Simsbury, especially with the Performing Arts Center and now with the statues. We're going to have a lot of out-of-towners coming to Simsbury, and we have a plan for a pretty significant marketing campaign to attract people to Simsbury for the statues, and to not have a visitor center and people coming into town, and it's sort of a point place, and this is a walking trail for many people. To not have a visitor center in town, this is probably the worst time to say we won't fund that, or we won't have a visitor center in Simsbury, especially when we're trying to attract so many people from the region to the town. So I would encourage you, I'm usually of the opinion slash everything, don't spend money on anything. That's typically the posture I will take, but in this situation, it's probably the worst timing for Simsbury not to fund that. And so I encourage you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Joan.
Joan Coe, 26 Wickham Drive. I would like to commend Town Manager Maria Caprioli for requiring all department managers to present a budget to the Board of Selectmen on March 10th, 2018, with a format that requires a presentation with structure, clarity, and purpose. Organizations that are asking for taxpayer money should be required to present a cost-benefit analysis to the town. I am concerned that the ambulance service is asking for $80,000 when Director Mike Dillahanty received a salary, according to the 990 finder, in 2015 of $141,788 and received a salary of $151,883 in 2016, an increase of $10,095. If the Simsbury Volunteer Ambulance is in need of money, why these outrageous salary increases? Avon has AMR ambulance service without any cost to the town and is satisfied with the service. It is time to have an RFP for ambulance service before any money is allocated to a private organization. The appropriation of $60,000 should be eliminated from the budget for economic development. The Charter Revision Commission recommends an economic development focus for the town. Money should be allocated where there is a legitimate need for the expenditure after reviewing all previous studies and the plan of development. I would like to suggest that all studies be placed in the operating budget since they are one-time expenditures and do not meet the guidelines for CNR or capital expenditures. Large expenditure for hardware and software should be reviewed on a cost analysis of lease versus purchase. Boards and commissions should not be combined since the members of the commissions have different disciplines and expertise. The Board of Education had an enrollment of 5,017 students in 2045. There were 4,110 students in 2017, a reduction of 907 students. They are reviewing adding sixth grade to the Henry James Middle School. The expenditure for capital improvement to Henry James Middle School of $23,903,620 should be eliminated until all options are finalized. There have been many capital expenditures supported by tax dollars for the Simsbury Golf Course. Bloomfield has contracted their golf course to professional management with good results. It is time to review the need for contracting for services from professional golf management. Many of these professional golf groups will allow Simsbury golfers the use of their nationwide courses. 200 Hop Meadow Street received a conditional permit from the DOT. This will allow the development to go forward. Since the Silverman Group will increase the population in Simsbury, and Simsbury has been forward-thinking in providing a clean environment, I would like to suggest that all large developments introduce a charging stations for their residents as an amenity for the residents with electric cars. Charging stations should be added to all large commercial and residential developments. According to Town Sale Properties, 2 Hop Meadow Street Realty has not paid $90,782.57 in taxes. The principal of the property is Mark Greenberg, who is candidate for state controller. Pursuant to my FOI request to review the reimbursement file of Jamie Rabbit, Director of Planning and Development, I reviewed the files. After reviewing the files, I was concerned about several reimbursements that I found questionable. On July 13, 2017, the town reimbursed Jamie Rabbit $603.33 for 16 books purchased through Amazon. The books were delivered to his home, and there was a cost of $33.99 in taxes. If these books were ordered for a town library, they should have been tax exempt. Was this purchase approved by the town? Why wasn't the town exempt number being used? Is this purchase personal or for the town library? There was a charge on November 8, 2017 for Hebron, Connecticut, Jamie Rabbit's home, to Boston, Massachusetts, and Watertown with a charge of 248 miles, tolls of $14.40, and food for $8.56. Jamie Rabbit's reimbursement for the November 8, 2017 trip did not have any backup material, and it appears he did not attend a convention in Boston on that date. Why the trip to Boston? On January 12, 2017, there was a charge for 225.70 miles from Simsbury to Stamford, the $990 for lunch with no backup for a convention. On July 23, 2017, 26.40 miles were charged for travel to Nodbrook Road and Bushy Hill areas, also West Simsbury. On January 30th, 2017, mileage was charged for travel from Town Hall to 85 Climax Road. Why is Jamie Rabbit taking his personal car for in-town travel when town cars are available? There was a charge for a purchase of a display port from Best Buy on September 13, 2016 for $31.89 with a charge of $1.90 in taxes. What was the need for the purchase since we have an IT department? Was this a personal purchase? These reimbursements appear to be cause for concern. I am asking a review of my allegations. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at JoanCo, news feed on Facebook, and Simsbury Forum topics. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Joan.
Thanks, John.
Anybody else? Yes, please.
I'm Sue Brockwitz, 10 Pinecrest Drive.
I understand that the Board of Selectmen has asked the Conservation Commission for comments on and possible recommendations for approval of the 4 town forest management plans. I have read all 4 plans and find it very disturbing that they are logging plans as opposed to protective conservation plans. They are focused not on ecosystem health, but on harvesting and on creating conditions to support continued harvesting. I think that most people who enjoy the recreational opportunities in our relatively intact town forests would be upset to find them transformed by repeated logging as called for in these plans. But the public as a whole is most likely not aware that this could happen. Most people probably think of our town forests as protected open space. I hope you will do what you can to keep them protected and unlogged. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak tonight? Okay, great. So we're going to move on to the first selectman's report and then the town manager's report. So as we know, the town manager has presented the Board of Selectmen with a proposed budget of $20.9 million that funds services for the upcoming fiscal year, which starts in July. For the most part, it maintains current services and programs and offers some modest service enhancements, including the addition of a weekly cafe-style lunch at the senior center. I really encourage you to review the budget. It's on the town's website under the finance department. I'll also be providing a link in the version that goes out on news and announcements tomorrow. On the website, we've included a copy of the full budget, but you can also find the town manager's budget presentation, which is a more concise summary. And we've also included a tax calculator because it gets a bit complex this year with the revaluation. So I guess the thing I would caution is that those numbers are likely to change before they're completely final, but it'll give you an idea what this budget as presented would mean for what you pay. As far as next steps go, I expect that we'll be making our final vote on the budget from the Board of Selectmen at our meeting on Thursday. And then after that, we'll be presenting on March 28th to the Board of Finance. And then April 5th, the Board of Finance holds their public hearing. And the exact date of the referendum is still yet to be determined. I frequently hear from constituents about the taxes we pay and the services we receive, and I believe that our budget is a reflection collectively of what we value as a community. And to that end, I really hope that people in this room and people watching lend their voice to this process, because I think it's just really important. This isn't our budget, it's your budget, and we represent you. Other things I wanted to bring to your attention, AARP volunteers are providing free income tax filing assistance at the Simsbury Public Library every Tuesday through April 10th, and it's by appointment only, and you can make appointments by contacting the Senior Center. Community for Care is hosting a forum on the dangers of vaping March 14th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Simsbury Public Library. Stole your thunder, but wanted to give that plug. The Farmington Valley Trails Council will present their first annual Trail Safety Expo March 17th, 10:30 to 3:30 at the Simsbury Public Library. I also wanted to mention the subject of the Deepwater Wind Solar Project. Nothing new to share publicly at this time, but I just did want to give a recap of where the project stands, because it's something that I'm asked about frequently. On January 22nd, the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to appeal the Connecticut Siting Council's ruling to allow the solar project to move forward. And I want to emphasize that the purpose of our appeal is to make sure that specific concerns are adequately addressed. And the town is currently in talks with Deepwater Wind, who's the developer, and those talks are progressing. The number one most important issue that we're focusing on is public health. The second issue is adequate screening and removing from the project what's known as Parcel 5, which is along Hoskins and would be the most visible portion of the project. I've got a more detailed list of what we're discussing that'll be emailed out as part of news and announcements. And if you're interested in receiving town news and announcements delivered by email, you can sign up at the town's website. At the very bottom of the homepage, you'll see a section called Connect, where you can decide what kind of communication you want to receive. So with that, let me turn it over to Maria.
Thank you.
I have a very brief manager's report this evening. Our executive session that was scheduled for this evening regarding Deepwater Wind has been canceled. Our town attorney did reach out to me today and stated that he did not have an update for us at this time, so that executive session will not be needed. I wanted to thank everyone for their time and participation in the budget workshop on Saturday. I wanted to provide a special thanks to our leadership team for all of their hard work and preparation for the workshop on Saturday. They were all also just a tremendous help to me as I was getting acclimated to the organization. As many of you know, I was only here for 4 weeks at the time of my presentation of the manager's budget, and they were all just terrific and entertained many questions from me. And again, I'm just very grateful to the leadership team for all of their hard work and helping to prepare that budget that you received, as well as for the workshop on Saturday.
I'd like to echo that, too.
Thank you. Yeah. As discussed, I am working with the leadership team on providing some service reduction scenarios, as well as the cost of those savings should we move forward with any of those service reductions. And we will have a memo for you for Thursday evening's meeting. On Friday, March 2nd, myself and First Selectman Wellman and Chris Peterson, we attended an economic development workshop that was co-sponsored by COST. I found the workshop to be particularly informative, especially around the areas in regards to permitting processes and how that can serve as a barrier to development. And I think as you move forward with your conversation around economic development and visioning and your strategy, some of that information that we learned at that workshop will be helpful for that conversation. For news and notes, a quick update on our various leadership team recruitments. The finance director treasurer position, the applications are due on March 16th. We have scheduled first round interviews for April 4th, and I will be meeting with the Board of Finance tomorrow evening to discuss my recommendation for an interim appointment to finance director. I met with the Culture, Parks, and Recreation Commission last week to discuss a potential recruitment plan and job posting for the Culture, Parks, and Recreation Director position. The commission was supportive of the plan as presented, so that job is currently posted with applications due at the end of this month, and we have tentatively scheduled interviews for the week of April 23rd. And additionally, board members Payne and Peterson have agreed to assist with the interview panels, so thank you to your both for that. We are currently reviewing applications for the police chief position. As you may recall, that closed last week. We are working to select applicants that will be invited for the first round, and the first round interviews will be held next week on March 22nd. And lastly, under special events, there will be a suicide prevention program for veterans being held at the public library on March 31st from 3 to 5 p.m. All members of the public are welcome to attend, and details regarding the event are provided in the report. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Maria. Moving on to selectmen action. A is tax refund requests. Is there a motion to approve the presented tax refunds in the amount of $320.29 and authorize the town manager, Maria Capriola, to execute the tax refunds?
So move.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. B is acceptance of the Simsbury Public Library State Construction Grant. Is there a motion effective March 12, 2018 to accept the Connecticut State Library Construction Grant in the amount of $405,525 to be used for the Simsbury Public Library's lower-level renovation project, and to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to execute related grant documents?
So move. Or second.
Is there any further discussion on this? Anything, Maria, anything you wanted to add on this one?
No, just that simply this was a procedural matter, so we could
Yeah.
formally accept the grant.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And I'll mention on this one that construction is expected to start in October and wrap up next spring. And also our thanks to the Friends of the Library who donated $95,000 for the design of the space. So it's going to be great. C is federal appropriations requests. So last week I received a message from Congresswoman Estes' office to see if there are any local projects that the town would like to make an appropriations request to potentially get federal funding for. Maria spoke with her leadership team and came up with a couple of ideas, and one was to basically see if we could get a grant for the Hot Meadow Streetscape improvements, which we had received a state grant for that, which had since been rescinded. Anything that you would add to that?
Sure. So we had been awarded a grant by the state. Unfortunately, because of the financial crisis, they did rescind that. So I felt, and again, reviewing this with Sarah Nielsen, that this was potentially a project that could be a good candidate for the federal appropriations request. Again, we went through a competitive grant application for that particular project. I think it was well vetted at this level as well as at the state level. And since the anticipated funding source for that project dried up, that perhaps we could again try and seek a federal appropriations request for that project. And again, while the federal appropriations request is not a formal competitive grant application process, I wanted to proceed cautiously and seek your either concurrence that you would like me to proceed with submitting that request on the town's behalf before I actually did so.
Any other questions for Maria on this?
Can we slip in the senior center on one of these federal bills too?
So so I wanted to bring that up for
Basically what this is, right? I mean,
conversation.
they're gonna tag this onto a much larger federal
Yeah.
bill, right?
Yeah. So yeah, a discussion, I mean, that was another potential option for renovations. Yeah, Cheryl?
I would just say that I have heard comment from the Aging and Disability Commission about the pavers. You know, bricks and pavers are not very conducive for seniors and people with disabilities to walk on or use any other adaptive devices on. And they have expressed those concerns several times, that bricks and pavers may not be the best surface to do that, but that's sort of a technical thing that's in it, but I noticed that it is in here as pavers, so I don't know if that's something that we can adjust or we can do that afterwards, but it is a comment that I hear quite frequently from,
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. It might be aesthetically pleasing, but it's not always.
It is, I mean,
Yeah.
it's very pretty to look at, but it's very
Yeah.
difficult to use. You know, if you have any type of cane, walker, wheelchair, anything like that, or even, you know, difficulty seeing, you know, and clearly delineating lines in the sidewalk, you know, it's very hard to walk on pavers and bricks, so.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have a position left or right of pavers or whatever the product is, but if you do go north to south on Hot Meadow Street, over the years, we have a patchwork of, and it almost seems as if every 5 years, something becomes more in vogue to use, whether it's because of look, feel, permeability, solutions, whatever mean. I don't know, so I don't know what the perfect solution is, but I just hope that we start to get something that's consistent.
Okay.
And I would first agree that our overarching concern and litmus test should always be safety. And then from there down goes presentability and aesthetics.
And actually, consistency is better for those
Consistency.
using it.
And also, we also
yeah.
think that as a concern for our taxpayers, then obviously, again, maintenance long-term,
Right.
so.
Okay.
Again, I'm not a paver expert.
I know,
But-
yeah.
Yeah.
Through that lens.
I am-
Yeah, Sean?
Just, Sean, can you refresh my memory? Did we get 2 of these grants? Didn't we get one of these years and years ago, and we've been sitting on that waiting for this one, and then this one got pulled, or am I misremembering this?
I think this was the third one.
Second or-
There was a streetscape, there was another streetscape grant, I don't remember if it was the same.
Yeah.
I thought we were waiting for this one to then expend those funds for that one.
I can double check and get back to you on that.
Okay. But again, I have no issue with this, it's just, I'm trying to recall how many of these we got.
I thought this was the third one, and we had
Second or
2
third
other
one.
ones. Because
Like we
I
spent-
thought we kind of did the middle of the center of town, and then we did more of the southern end. And then we were looking for this one that,
This was for the bump outs, right?
right. That's my recollection, but by all means, check.
Yeah.
And I would agree with Sherry's comments that we do want our residents to be safe, whether they're in a baby carriage or a wheelchair or just trying to walk or with a walker. That should be our most important priority. But
Yeah.
if this forum lends itself to adding the senior center in, I'm all in. The worst they can do is say no.
Yeah, so how comfortable would you be with basically putting in the appropriations request, understanding that some of those details could change for, based on the feedback.
Sure. So I just want to make sure that I'm summing up consensus. So I'm hearing consensus on applying for or submitting a request for the $548,500 for the streetscape improvements, but noting that if we were awarded the funds, our initial proposal, which outlines the pavers, may change somewhat to make sure that we're using material that is going to be safe for persons with disabilities. And that second, you would like me to submit a second appropriations request for the senior center. And I also, if that is the case, just want to confirm that you would be looking for the full amount that I submitted in the CIP, which was $8 million and some change. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
my
my
thinking.
understanding.
All in,
Would someone,
Just a question, I mean, so we've got the grant already written, obviously, for the pavers and streetscape. How much effort is it? Because you've only got a day. I mean, is it possible from the documentation that we have to be able to get that in, or are we asking for more than is possible right now?
Right. So the submission form, which is included in the packet, if you flip to it, it's actually an online form, and it only asks for some very, very basic information. So I think based on the feedback that I'm provided, I'm certainly able to work with Kristen, and we can just fill out this, very simple form for the senior center on your behalf.
Actually, we have a lot of planning documents and,
Studies.
artist renderings and all
Yes.
sorts of
Yeah.
things
Got all kinds of
on
stuff.
that project, so, which could be attached.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Under other information.
Just wanted to make sure what we were asking for was possible, so thank you.
yeah, and, it's, I don't know how likely this is to be successful, but it's not a heavy lift, and given that we've already come so far in having all these documents, I think it's a
Right.
good case. So, would someone,
Well, and it's a historic building, and we are repurposing it for an important use, and I think
Yeah.
that's the point here, is we're trying to use our resources, maybe in a different way, but, use the same historic buildings that we all love. We should be able to renovate them.
And it may even qualify as shovel-ready, who knows? So,
yeah, would someone mind making that motion?
What do
So-
you need for a motion here?
Well, there was a proposed motion on the streetscape project, so perhaps making a motion to that effect, and then a similar motion for the senior center. Submittal?
Okay, I'll make the motion for the one that you already have written. I move effective March 12, 2018, to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to submit a federal appropriations request in the amount of $548,500 for the Hot Meadow Streetscape Improvement Project as presented in the attachments.
second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. And I'll do the same one, and I'll amend that slightly for Eno. Is there a motion effective March 12, 2018, to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to submit a federal appropriations request for the Eno renovations in the amount, do we have an amount?
Sean, do you have, Sean, I think might have that number.
It's in here.
8.8 million.
$8,800,000.
In the amount of $8.8 million.
8.8 million.
Yeah, I'll put a period at the end of that. Is there?
Second.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
I moved that apparently.
I'm glad we got that. I want to move on to item D, which is on the subject of budget holdbacks. The history on this is that late in the budget process last year, the Board of Selectmen presented $50,000 in proposed cuts to a number of programs and organizations. The Board of Finance, long story, but essentially agreed to allow the Board of Selectmen, if we chose, to restore funding in full or in part at a later date. And Cheryl requested this item be put on the agenda, so I wanted to see if you would be able to.
I did request it,
Conversation.
only because, after receiving the letter from the chamber regarding the visitor center, I felt that, given our emphasis on economic development and the importance of tourism and the visitor center, to that economic development effort, and the fact that we did have the opportunity to put that money back, and it was my understanding that it was being held in contingency and had not been appropriated anywhere else, that we should restore the visitor center funding. If Melissa and John can correct me if that's a mistake, I think, is that correct?
It's not been appropriated anywhere else, it's still in contingency and available. I think, as the memo, I think, outlines, there was some consideration for the Deepwater Wind expenditures and whether we may need some of the excess contingency funds this year. But right, as of right now, it is unspent in that total contingency line item in the amount of $50,000.
For the prior fiscal, not the fiscal year that we're now working on the budget for, but this current one.
For the fiscal year we're in.
So this would not be for, the year that we are now currently, the 18, 19 year, but the funds we are still holding from the current fiscal year.
Yeah, Sean?
So just a question, so if we're gonna give them back to one organization, why are we not gonna give it back to the other organizations? Because everybody's arguably in the same boat, and I think the first selectwoman at the time went to each of those organizations and asked them if they could take that cut because of the totality of the cuts, and everybody was in that together, so if we're picking and choosing who gets what back, it seems to be somewhat disingenuous to what we tried to do last year. Again, I'm not trying to punish these organizations, but we asked everybody in the first selectwoman who was kind enough to take a cut herself against our advice.
But some of those
I'm not
cuts
done. Hold
are,
on.
I'm sorry.
And again, I want to make sure that we're treating the organizations fairly. And two, this is not a visitor center. It is not open on Saturday and Sunday. It is not open at key times in town. It is in the basement of a building that nobody but this board and some people that come into this room and members of the chamber know it exists. And I respect what the chamber does. It's a fantastic organization, but this is not a visitor center. This is an administrative salary for an employee of the chamber. And yes, they do provide pamphlets. Yes, they do pick up the phone, but we are not paying for a visitor center. The visitor center needs to be centrally located in town, and it is, but people need to know that it exists. So I'm not arguing against putting it back, but as I said on Saturday, if we're going to commit to a visitor center, then we need to do it right. It needs to be in a visible location. It needs to be advertised. It needs to be open when people are coming to this community, when they're renting bikes on weekends, perhaps on evenings, in the summer. But again, a 9 to 4 or a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, that's a business, not a visitor center.
I don't disagree with you on any of that. My only point on this one was this was money we had allocated, and then we took it away. And this is an organization that is trying its best under very difficult circumstances in a less than ideal location. And, they're doing what they can with the money that we had already allocated. So when we took that away, we took away any ability of theirs to perform those services, which we had asked them to do originally. So that was my only motivation. I do not disagree with you that it is not the visitor center that we would all like to see.
Yeah, Chris.
For me personally, I think I articulated on Saturday I would support this for the next budget cycle. But when we made decisions on this $100,000 last year, for me personally, my own decision-making value was these were cuts that would be permanent regardless of what the economic circumstances were that arose. That was not a decision that we made collectively as a board. That was just my own personal decision. So for that reason, I wouldn't be supportive of restoring that in this budget year.
Yeah, Mike.
I think I've heard some good points all the way around. I think Sean's point that this is not the ideal visitors location center is a very good one. It had been in other sites. It was moved to this site with the town's knowledge. I think to Sherry's point, my understanding, or to her point, that those are discussions I think we need to have going forward, not so much in the rearview mirror. My recollection when we made these cuts is that it was in anticipation of the state further reducing our funding, and these were, frankly, our cuts to get to a certain point. The state ended up not making those cuts. We ended up with the contingency that was talked about. I would be in favor of putting back the 5,000 for the chamber and 5,000 for the Main Street Partnership. I think we represented that it was kind of all in, and everybody's pulling the boat together, and everybody has to share the pain. Not to make a really bad joke. Sorry. But that's where I would like to see us end up.
I didn't know that there was a visitor center in town. I mean, you know, guys, you know me, I'm all about transparency. That's because I'm generally not a visitor to my own town. So this was something that was illuminating to me. I applaud that organization now that I've learned a little bit about it, but I am wholeheartedly on board with what Sean is saying and Cheryl saying. It's like that's the way to not get out of any conflict. I have learned about the challenges and the requests, once at Fitzgerald's and one time, believe it or not, at the working out in the gym. And can we have this money back and such? And then, but those approaches added to just the letter that we received the other day, they aren't enough for me to make a conscious decision about what is the best way forward with this money. It is small to some people and it's large to others. So in theory, I would, even if it's maintained in a dark basement in a building that nobody ever visits, if they provide value and they can demonstrate to us that it provides value, I would fully support putting it into next year's budget, as we are already considering. But as it's presented now, I haven't seen enough of a material representation and presentation to justify making the consideration. And that may also apply to some of the other ones as well, so.
So Sean, were you gonna add something?
Just one final point. I mean, if the chamber needs this 5,000 to stay solvent and to be a contributing, organization that it's done a great job with, I think that's a different conversation, and I think I can't speak for everybody here, we would certainly hear that.
Yeah.
And especially in a going forward basis, if the chamber needed more than 5,000 to stay a solvent organization and to contribute the way they have, I think I certainly would be willing to hear that. But again, this has been characterized to me as rent. It's been characterized to me as administrative salary, and I believe it was characterized to me in prior years as one other option. I think it was pamphlets and administrative salary. So again, I'm willing to consider it going forward, but as I said tonight and previously, if we're serious about a visitor center, then let's get serious about it. Saturdays, summers, let's do this the right way. Is the library the right place for it? Is one of our local businesses the right place for it? That's a place that there's lots of opportunities here. And again, I commend the chamber for their efforts, but let's get serious about it if we're going to do it.
So I disagree with nothing that I've heard. I think everyone really makes good points, and this is a tough one. But for me, I just don't want this to be seen as not being supportive of the chamber or not being supportive of tourism.
Not at all.
Because I think that is, as Sean said, if we're serious about a visitor center, let's do it right. And I think have the funds to match it, assuming that makes sense. So I guess with this conversation, would anyone want to put a motion on the table or continue on?
I'd put a motion on the table for fiscal year 17-18 to give $5,000 to the Chamber of Commerce for a visitor center and $5,000 to the Main Street Partnership.
With a friendly amendment that's coming from the contingency funds, not from,
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yes.
I would second that.
Okay, is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So the motion goes down 4-2. Again, thanks for the discussion, and I really do appreciate the the phone calls and the reach out from the chamber on this. So. Item E is, so moving from the current fiscal year to the upcoming fiscal year, We did have a full-day budget workshop where each department head walked through their budget. Throughout the day, there were some items that came up for discussion. Some of us called them a wish list, some of us called them a parking lot. I like parking lots, so I'll go with that. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time with this group with a fresh set of eyes and walk through those items, both on the plus and delta column, to see if there's anything that we would propose adding or potentially taking out. So what I would propose we do tonight is to review this list, have some discussion around it, and at our next meeting on Thursday, Maria would be prepared to share with us some thoughts at a high level, what it would take to get closer to the 1.75% guidance. So at that meeting, we'll, have more of the data we need to make a decision.
Eric, can I just ask one question?
Yeah, Chris.
So we had the $7,000 budgetary adjustment that we had made. And I think that actually bumps our proposed increase from 3.89 to 3.92. Is that reflected in there right now?
It's the first one, it's actually a net increase, it's 8,000 here, I don't know if you can see the cursor.
Oh, okay, I see,
Services
thank you.
budget shift,
Yeah.
correction 8,000, and then the line that it should have been in, that needs now, was in, can be reduced by 1,000.
Okay.
And the net impact is 7,000, so they're kind of on a corresponding road there.
But that really isn't a decision, it's a de facto fact, right? I mean, it's 8,000 that's in the budget that wasn't. So I look at our proposed increases, adding that back in, just on a personal level. It's not really discretionary, it seems to me.
Right. It was intended to be in the budget, so the budget was intended to be
Right.
at 3.92, that's
Okay.
correct. But we would need a motion, because as presented, at this point, the budget is in your hands.
Okay.
Correct.
Is that a motion that we would do tonight or on Thursday?
Typically, the way we've read these motions in the past, and I have them ready if needed, but what we would do is you would adopt the budget, incorporating all the changes as discussed, and then I end up listing all of them, positive and negative, so that it's just clear, and then the numbers sum to the correct number. So
Okay, so we don't need
you
to
don't have
handle
to do
those
it
right
now,
now.
but it certainly, I can take notes and color green if you'd like anything that you've already agreed to, that's fine. Green is It's a good time of the year. So, we can certainly do that, right?
You basically listen to me make motions for half an hour.
Okay. So right now, the Chamber of Commerce, the Visitor Center contribution, is that in the budget?
So it was not included in the budget.
Okay.
What the town manager recommended, though, that is new this year, is participation as a dues-paying member. So
yeah.
you could do both of those, and together that would be $5,825. Right now, the budget includes $825, which is now I have here as a possible reduction, again, just as a placeholder, that if you just wanted to restore funding to the chamber in the amount of $5,000, you don't actually need to restore all $5,000 to the budget as proposed now. It would be less than $825. So that's why it's up there as kind of a placeholder. We wouldn't have to necessarily do one or the other.
Historically, in the past, the chamber has made the town an honorary member and not charge us dues. I think we'd have to ask them, how do you want to accomplish this? I don't have an answer. We can make a call before Thursday, I'm sure. Find that out.
Yeah, so would the decision be then, we could either do nothing, we could do $5,000 or $5,800 and change. Am I framing that right? Could I?
Actually, a fourth
Yeah,
option
sure.
would be the 5,000 less the membership dues. nets out to 5,000 too, but, you know, I'm not sure where they're gonna end up.
Okay. Are there, I mean, since we've just been on this topic, what are the thoughts about adding the 5,000 back into next year's budget?
Well, I personally am still an advocate of it, so.
I would be in favor of that.
I would agree.
I'm not sure I'm in favor of paying dues that they haven't asked us to pay, but, I mean, I would certainly respect their decision if that's what they do, but they have always offered it to us, gratis, so.
Yeah. Maria?
Sure, and I had included the 825 because the 5,000 wasn't budgeted previously, and thought that, you know, if the board had wanted to support the chamber in some way, that perhaps, again, being a dues paying member, which is pretty common amongst municipalities, might be a way to accomplish that. But I'm sure if they had the option of receiving $5,000 or $825,
It's not a hard decision.
right, that's not a hard decision. So again, I think that's probably just a comfort level on your part in terms of if you do want to support them, in which manner do you feel more comfortable doing so?
Okay. Chris?
So, again, I'm supportive of the $5,000 towards the chambers as a co-participation in the support of the visitor centers. But I don't know what that is. I haven't understood or been presented to a comprehensive explanation of exactly what that $5,000 contribution gets the taxpayers the town of Simsbury. So I don't feel like I can vote for it right now without actually understanding unless and I will trust my fellow board members to say, yeah, just trust me, we're getting something for that $5,000. But right now I feel like I'm sort of pressured into saying yes to something I said no to about refunding for essentially this current year, and then going forward, it's the same thing. Again, I have no problem at all doing it if I understood more about what is the contribution we get from that $5,000. And we're just saying, hey, just give $5,000. I understand will be appropriate for other budget line items, but this one, I'm not clear on.
Again, I've asked for 4 years what it means for the visitor center contribution, and I've gotten 3 different answers, so. Again, we have been supportive of it, but
Perhaps we should ask a chamber representative to come in and discuss that on Thursday.
100%. Please make a presentation to me. And
we've gotten an
explain.
email, and I presume that's what we're gonna get, that there's pamphlets handed out, that there are phone calls.
Well, but then we would have an opportunity to ask questions
Yeah.
about what
Yeah,
the,
but there's also, I mean, as I understood, again, because I'm not clear, I've had a couple different sort of flyby conversations, that person is supporting the efforts at the same time of the chamber. So I don't know if have they done a cost breakdown? Have they done any sort of study to show us, well, this is this is the dollar, no, this is a percentage of $1 is going towards this, the chamber's endeavors, and a percentage is going towards the towns. So that's the kind of thing I would see, other than just the letter. I apologize.
I'm very supportive of Maria's proposal, which is, I would assume next year we would be, requiring a more rigorous and standardized process for outside entities that want funding. I think that would also allow us to make sure we're asking those questions and understanding the full value of what we're getting. I'm inclined to support it this year, knowing that next year there will be definitely a set of questions to answer and a set of criteria that we can use competitively among other organizations to make that decision.
But again, I have no issue supporting the chamber, as I've said, and if they're gonna tell me or tell us that this is potentially a dilution of their services, and they need this $5,000 to provide for our businesses and our residents, then I'm 100% in support of it. But again, the concept that this is a visitor center, this is not a visitor center. So I think as part of the next year, we need to I hate these, but subcommittee or whatever, or through the town manager, again, let's embark on what a visitor center should be, what are the hours, what is the funding, and I'm willing to go up.
Yeah.
To me, it's not the $5,000. It's I don't feel that we've been genuine with what the 5,000 is going for.
Yeah, so as we start talking about an economic development process, I think tourism's part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And envisioning what a visitor center could be for our town, whether it's, a virtual one or in person, it's definitely part of the conversation. So I think that could be the forum in which we
Put a 2
have
in
that.
front of it, put another
Eric,
0 on there, yeah.
Yeah, Chris?
The only other thing I would throw out there is, I think everyone would agree it's not an ideal visitors center. My memory of the history on this, and I don't remember it 100%, is there had been a discussion that had been generated with economic development, Main Street, about the desirability of having a visitors center. And the chamber kind of came forward with, hey, this is a proposal as to how we could fulfill that. So I do want to recognize in this that they were trying to stand up to a need that had been vocalized within the community and come to us with an accommodation that was
Right.
getting us towards what we were looking for. So I think the conversations on what is an appropriate visitor center is totally fair. But I also think, we should recognize that they were trying to respond to a community need that was being articulated at the same time, so.
Fair point.
Okay.
Yep, I think
So-
that's a great point.
Yeah, Chris, that actually helps me, so I appreciate that.
And I recall we had a lot of discussion about where this was going to be and who was going to staff it. And the chamber did kind of step up to take that on. Like I said, I don't remember the exact conversation, but I concur with you that they did, they weren't the ones that said, yeah, we're going to have a visitor center in our office.
And that discussion continued when we were looking at having the community center down at the PAC site.
Right.
There actually had been a conversation
About
of,
moving it,
could there be
yeah.
a site that could be used for that? So-
Exactly.
So are we in agreement then that, or leading the witness in the sense that we're not going to make a decision right now, and we're going to say the best thing is possibly to have more discussion by a representative, maybe Thursday night at the budget meeting, so that we can make I can make an informed decision other than an emotional decision.
Yeah, Mike?
My recollection is this is actually the third visitor center site that we've had in town. One had been at the former Arts Exclusive. There was one before that, but I can't remember where it was.
The Historical Society.
Oh.
It was
That's right,
It was
that's
in
right.
the,
That's right.
I knew there was
The
another one.
church, yeah.
Yeah.
And, but the chamber did come forward to fill that void. And I would be in favor, and I think as part of our economic development, figuring that out, that this would be a key piece of it. And to your point, Eric, I think it's a good one, that whether it's a physical site or a virtual site or something in between, I think is a very good point. And, but asking them to come Thursday, I think would be very helpful.
Yeah, I don't see a downside in doing that, so, okay.
Make the
A
request.
short
that
presentation.
Yes. We can ask questions and appreciate the discussion.
I'm not sure
Anything else
Lisa
on this?
Gray is in town this week, but perhaps somebody else could come from the chamber.
I'm sure there's,
Yeah.
well, at least a handful of well-informed.
I'm sure
and
somebody else could
impassioned
do it, but,
members of the.
yeah, there should be somebody available.
Yeah. Okay.
Eric, can I just make two other
Yeah,
points
sure.
quickly? And Cheryl was reminding me of one, but, we're presenting here basically a 3.89 to 3.94 budget. But for people who are listening, this is pulling out the $2.5 million contingency fund that was in our budget last year. I mean, technically, our budget was presented as a 15.5% increase last year because of the contingency fund. If you put the contingency fund back in here, this budget is actually a decrease of about 7%. So I just think it's important for people to recognize that. And I completely agree at looking at it this way, it's the appropriate way. The other thing I wanted to say is, as someone who believes that we really have to at least take a look at how can we reduce this towards 1.75, I do think that's a real difficult challenge. And the only thing that came to my mind this weekend is there's maybe three things that are the bulk of discretionary decision-making, and they're not even really discretionary. One is the, over 200,000 of capital to operating budget The other is the 80,000 for the Ambulance Association, and the other is the 60,000 for support for economic development. And as I was thinking, I'm thinking those are your only big bogeys that maybe have some degree of flexibility. I'm not sure to what extent they actually are. So I just throw that out there as an awareness. I don't know if you nip here, take a tuck here, if it adds up to anything, but I do think reducing this is going to be a challenge. And so those are just, thoughts that I had. Sean?
I mean, I would agree, Chris, it's, do we cut those, or, I mean, again, do we talk about plow drivers and police officers, and I don't want to do that, unless we would absolutely have to, and again, our town staff does a phenomenal job, and, that's a conversation we've had with the Board of Finance in the past, is, yes, we can get to any number you want, but is the Board of Finance comfortable with, we are going to cut services, because that's the only way we can get there. There are contractual obligations we have in here that cannot be cut. So the only way to get to those numbers is through priorities or through people, and it's not a pretty process. So, I agree with where your head is at, Chris, that, we need to be very thoughtful and very careful what we come to on Thursday. And if we get, I think there's a philosophical discussion that we have the discussion, and we're still comfortable at 389 or 392, and we go in there and explain to the Board of Finance why we think that makes sense, and that we feel strongly that that represents what the taxpayers expect. If they send us back, that's, then we have another conversation. But I'm not afraid of, and I don't think anybody here is, of going in at 3.9 or 4.3 or whatever it is, if it makes sense, because our job is to represent the service side of this community and to make sure that the residents are getting their streets plowed and that they're safe and that the streets are taken care of and there's recreation and that the forest is managed and again, obviously maintaining town staff as well, so.
That's well articulated, Sean, and even at that level, 3.94, there's less than 1% of true discretionary spending in there. And a good half of that is the Ambulance Association, which in some ways is not really discretionary. So, so I would agree with your points.
And I think we have to take into account what we did last year. I mean, we did a lot of cutting last year. And because we had to, and, it was difficult to do, but, we all, rose to the challenge and did what we had to do. Unfortunately, as I looked at it, on Sunday, my thoughts were going the other way. I was reviewing our conversations about opioid crisis and what our needs are as far as social services and other programs that we really would like to do. And unfortunately, I was more in the add back than the take out at that point. Well, only because of what we went through last year, and I think we've gotten to the point where, people-wise, we really can't reduce anymore. So we're either gonna cut out services that we would all like to provide, or we're gonna really, do some damage to what,
That's a great point, Cheryl.
and I don't wanna do
Yeah.
that.
I mean, given the circumstances of this year, if you look, take out expenditures, but look at revenues, where the Board of Ed is coming in, where our surplus is. If we were at 2%, 2.5%, we literally would have a conversation as to if we were to go up 1%, what would we add back in that would be, highly value added. I mean, I've seen that happen once or twice in the past.
I know.
And this year, we're not in a position to do that because of the amount, but you are right.
I understand that.
We are obligated to look at what would be the next, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 that would be spent, and how much value would that add?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess to that end, I'm interested in hearing thoughts about lines 10 through 12, which would be the addition of it'd be a social worker, right? So the context here, Kristen was asked, what would you, if you could do any service augmentation to social services, what would it be? And that was your suggestion. Is there conversation around this item?
Eric?
Yeah, Mike.
Having watched for the last couple of years, everything that's gone on in social services, and in all honesty, sitting on the Juvenile Review Board, even today, there is a need in this town. And anybody that questions whether the need is real or not, please go to Wednesday night to the vaping issue. We have a number of children in this town that do not understand the whole impact of vaping, what's in that vapor, is that what it's called? Juice.
Yeah.
And where you get it and what's in it, and I can't talk about the cases that come before us, but as a parent, it's mind-boggling. And if you think kids were challenged 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it is way worse now. And I can't get into the details, but it's a significant problem. And frankly, folks, the drugs are here. There is a heroin problem, an opioid problem in town, and we can't ignore it. And I think we really need to be preemptive, just like we were with the police department a few years ago, or with the Public Works Department, less than that. And if we don't get in front of it, we're going to be chasing ourselves. And I would be absolutely supportive of adding 10 through 12. And I'm happy to go with the town manager and for Selectmen's permission to argue that point before the Board of Finance, because I do think it's important.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And I brought that question up just because as I've had the privilege to sit with all you folks and listen to the past stewards of this town and give me anecdotal information about really the things that I didn't realize go on in this town. And I certainly will admit freely that, I quite often through life trip through my own bubble because I've got my own my little ecosystem to be concerned with. And as human beings, it's nature to first to support your own, and then you look as an impassioned individual to support those for the rest of the community. But as I've had this opportunity to sit in this position and be, and engage different citizens, I've been really blown away by what services people in this town receive, and also been blown away because of, like myself, the amount of people who don't believe there are those types of opportunities or situations going on in our town, whether they're senior issues, they're fuel assistance issues, they're the eviction issues, certainly the youth services issues.
Drug overdoses.
Drug overdoses. When you listen to the chief the other night talk about, year to date, we will eclipse. We'll have a potential 50% increase by the end of the year in heroin overdoses. So those kinds of things. When I pose that question, Kristen is the type of person that if it was puppies, you'd bring home every single puppy you could every single night. That's your problem, right? But we're lucky to have a person like you. It's part of our town now. So that's really where my sort of direction is coming from, and how important I think this is. We have the finest, shiniest plow trucks in the state of Connecticut. We have the most amazing library. You may vote on the finest lab potentially in junior highs. We have a fantastic recreation complex. But we have a lot of people also who aren't being served by any of those things.
Well, I've had the privilege of talking about this issue with our police department, and, just to hear about what's on the front line, and they do come to our community for care meetings, and the biggest increase in calls they've had are mental health issues. Even if it's, anxiety, depression, suicide prevention, some of it doesn't even involve drugs or addiction. And, we do our best, but we do more than some towns and less than some others, but, it's one of those areas, and I have to say I'm, biased on that, front, but I think that's where we could improve.
Yeah, Sean.
This is my 7th budget, and this board and different iterations of this board have taken the lead on adding police officers when we needed to protect the community. We've added plow drivers when we needed to make sure that the streets are plowed and that the services are taken care of. We bought plowing equipment, we bought paving equipment, we've added custodians, we've added town staff in various departments. So to me, it's a no-brainer that we add social services because clearly there is a need to do so. And just like police officers and plow drivers and finance directors and town managers and all the other important members of our town staff, this individual or individuals that we hire in the future are going to make an appreciable difference to an underserved population in our town, correct? I mean, this hire will make a day one impact, and there's no cost-benefit analysis here. These are people. But if we have a licensed social worker on staff, the moment that person is hired, there will be a benefit to the residents of this community, right? I mean,
correct, and also just to speak to one of the points that Maria made on Saturday regarding my role as the director and coming on board. I am a licensed social worker. I'm a licensed master's level social worker, and I had approached and spoken with Maria that I'm fully prepared and willing to become a clinical level social worker, which would enable me to provide a little bit more deeper services to people that are coming in initially. So, today I had someone who came in on an emergency basis to my office, and I spent 2 hours with them. And, if I could provide some more initial counseling to them until they can get to the appropriate therapist to really work on their issues, then I'm providing that hands-on frontline service to them. And then also, adding the next level of another master's level employee would shift some of the responsibilities that I'm taking on of direct service, such as just signing people up for food, and would allow me to do some more work and have that person do some other things. And, maybe work on more things like bigger projects of renovations or senior centers, or participating in the opioid epidemic. How do we approach that regionally? I'd have more time to tackle those things.
Just to bring the point home a little bit more, when Sean and Chris and I were on the personnel subcommittee and we updated the description of Kristen's role, we all saw how many pages it took up to list everything that we expect that department to do. And all of that we are asking for under $500,000. I think just putting it all in perspective in the human terms, it's mind-boggling, but.
I'm cheap, but we need to
Yes.
we need to serve the thank you.
The only other consideration I would have, and I'm receptive to this, is this additional 84,000, came out of the conversation that we had, but it wasn't in the proposed budget. So one of the things I'd want to check this against, if we're going to add 85,000 to the budget, is this what Maria and town staff would say is the next $80,000 to spend on these specific positions versus other things that were discussed. So I would just want to get a little bit of insight into that along the way as well.
Good question.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Chris. Maybe bring that in for Thursday, if that's possible.
Sure, and I could.
Yeah, and even I'm sorry, go ahead, Maria.
Sure, I could elaborate a bit. This is a topic that Kristen and I have discussed quite a bit. Since I've arrived, I would be supportive of it, absolutely, if the board is supportive of advancing the initiative. Again, for a community our size and for the scope of services we're providing, the fact that we don't have a full-time social worker, that's something we could certainly improve on and build upon. So if the board is supportive of that, I, as manager, would be very supportive of that. I have had experience hiring master's level social workers in my previous place of employment. So I felt that providing that number of 60,000 was probably a pretty fair starting point. It's possible if we were to hire a BSW level social worker, that number might be a little less, or if we hired an MSW employee who was a little earlier on in their career, that number might be a little less. But if we were to hire a more experienced MSW level municipal social worker, I think that 60 number is probably right on target. And then again, the additional expense of the licensure for Kristen, that would definitely be a service enhancement, as we would have a licensed clinical social worker on staff, which we currently do not. So both of these would be very nice service enhancements to the community for sure. I had also spoken a bit with our chief about the opioid epidemic, and this is, I think, also a real possibility for some interdepartmental teamwork here in terms of helping with that referral piece, because they are responding to a tremendous amount of calls for service where folks could really use some outreach social work in terms of this particular topic.
Yeah. Chris?
So go ahead, because this is leading to another question.
Okay, let me finish this topic. My first question, so when I first saw this, to me, first of all, I'm very supportive. But when I first saw this, the first time I was hearing about this was Saturday, and it sounds like the conversation's been going on for quite some time, so that's helpful to hear, because my first pause was saying, well, is $85,000 or so added to your budget? Are we confident that this is the best use of that money? And given that this was not a spur-of-the-moment idea, I feel a lot better about that. Could you take just a moment, though, and educate me, especially because I'm asked about the opioid crisis? This person who's hired, what role would they play to mitigate that in our community?
Well, what I would like to see happen, and just to briefly touch one more point on the licensure, that's going to be local.
Kristen, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind just stepping to the mic so
And
folks at home can see you?
Thank you. Just on.
Sure.
So the piece about the licensure is that it's going to take approximately a year and a half to 2 years. But once that's accomplished, that expense will go away. So that won't be a recurring expense. So the recurring expense would be in hiring the new employee. And what I would like to see happen, and of course I would work on it further with Maria, is that I would be the lead in working on some of those larger issues, working on the interdepartmental collaboration with the police department and the ambulance and others as well to work on that opioid piece. And also some of our larger issues, how to continue with the juvenile review board to be the most effective that it can be to address the needs that we're seeing in our youth. They're babies. The ones that are coming to us for our JRBs, they're babies. They're middle schoolers. So we've got to do something to start preventing that. So that's more than just the opioid piece. It's a global problem. They're starting with vaping this juice that tastes like bubble gum, and in 10 years, we need to prevent them from falling down that slope. So my goal would be for the master's level employee to take on some of the roles that I'm doing now, seeing some of the cases for financial assistance and food assistance. That would be some of the things that they would be doing. And then working with our current part-time outreach employee, she does senior outreach, and then they would be doing outreach to other areas in the community, possibly doing forums or support groups for some of these larger issues. So it would be something that we would work on together, and then separating some of the duties. As Cheryl said, my job description, I think, is like 5 or 6 maybe pages. So we'll start, but I love it.
Great. Maria?
If I could also just ask Kristen to also elaborate on the choices counseling and how we're currently relying on volunteers for that piece and what that would entail and how this person may be able to assist with that.
That's a great point. Thank you for reminding me of that. Currently, choices counseling is something that is supported by the NCAAs in our area. That's the National Coalitions of Agency on Aging, and they train individuals that are called choices volunteers. And what a choices volunteer does is they work with any individual that is either a senior or an individual that's disabled that is currently on Medicare to help them to understand what their secondary insurance options are. So once you have Medicare, it covers certain things, but you need a secondary insurance to finish covering your bills and pay for your prescriptions, things of that nature. And a lot of people really struggle with what their options are. So our choices volunteers are people that provide that service. And once a year, there's an open enrollment period where if you're currently enrolled in a secondary plan, you can make changes to your plan. And it can take anywhere from an hour to 3 hours for one individual session for someone to understand what their best choice is. And we currently rely on a volunteer who is a senior herself, and she does a phenomenal job, but she is only available twice a month. And we experienced a lot of anxiety at the senior center just the end of this past winter when we had all these changes to the MSP, the Medicare Savings Plans. And a lot of people were really scrambling, trying to understand what their choices were. So one of our goals would be that either our current senior outreach person or a new MSW employee would either come already trained as a choices counselor, or we could send to choices training, which would then give us, I would not consider that an enhancement to our service. I would consider that a required service. So that would be something that would go into this job description.
Any other questions for Kristen? Okay, thank you.
If it came with another puppy, I'll take it. I couldn't resist.
I knew you weren't a cat person. It's a puppy.
Okay.
Can I ask you-
Yeah, please.
So the one thing I'm thinking of is, I think we have about 230,000 of cash to, or capital to operating budget, roughly, is about that?
Yeah, and I just want an important clarification on that point, though, is when we're talking about the 1.75%, that cash to capital is appropriated in your debt service line.
Right.
While dollar for dollar, the cuts to that amount, as we experienced last year, when we moved out these projects, it didn't change the overall Board of Selectmen budget from that 15.5%, you remember? So, depends on how specific the Board of Finance is on that rule, but technically the debt service line and the cash to capital line is really shared between the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed budget, because it funds both.
Right.
So, just know that if you're trying to hit 175 or a lower number, you're not gonna see a direct impact on that, but you will see a dollar for dollar impact on the mill rate.
Right, okay.
So, it's not, you can't get credit for it, I just want to make sure, we want people to be surprised that you're still at a higher number, that's what you meant.
Okay. Is there any more conversation on any of these on the left-hand side before we move to the right? I feel like I'm hearing consensus on these, and of course, on Thursday, we'll hope to hear from someone from the chamber to talk more about that one. Can you move to the right, please? Thanks. So these, help me refresh my memory. Which of these do we need action on versus are kind of in there? So the ones in
Right,
green.
so the ones in green, I can refresh you on this one too. Maria created a new line this year, just for a little more transparency on a line you may remember in the old police budget that just said collective bargaining. It was always a very confusing line. Under that are actually collectively bargained benefits, including uniform allowance and others. We have a code for uniform allowance, so just parsed that out this year, created a whole new line, so it's easier to see and easier to track. Unfortunately, though, when we pulled it out, the chief came back to us and corrected it. That should have been $1,400 difference that we need for uniform allowance versus the other. So in the interest of full transparency, we're going to correct it now, so you don't have to worry about it again in the future. But that's not an impact. I mean, that's just moving from education stipend $1,400 to a negative $1,400 for the uniform allowance. That one's built in, and it's in your overall appropriation anyway. But again, for the final motion, I would just include those on there they are changes to the budget as presented.
Sure.
The updated probate court, that one can be colored green. As of last week, we've been pushing back with them a little bit on their original request. As you'll recall, this is one that's shared with 3 other towns, so we have to work with them. There's a lot of communication with those other towns to make sure we're comfortable with what the numbers are. Our share, Simsbury's share would be reduced by $12.85 from the original request, so that one I would recommend accepting. These last two, the dial-a-ride is a possible cut. This is just one we were sort of tracking as we had the discussion on Saturday. That 1581 is the amount that revenue side of the ledger is expected to be impacted. If you wanted to adopt a corresponding cut in the dial-a-ride of 1585, that's why that's up there. But it just goes into general fund revenue. Ultimately, 1585 on our, $90 million budget does not really swing the needle too much on my revenue ledger, to be honest. But dollar for dollar, that is what it's there to fund, and you could certainly make a cut to the.
But at the end of the budget year, if we took that out, all that it means is that $1,581 does not go into reserves.
That's right.
Right. So, and we're putting in $1 million into reserves.
So I would recommend not recommend cutting the expense.
And that was 60 trips, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those are enhanced trips, so that would be medical.
Yeah. Those are the kind of the important ones. Not that they all aren't, but they're all
More
those are
important.
particularly important.
I'm hearing that, yeah.
I'm fine.
I would say so.
And so my feeling about the 825, it's just making the math complicated in my mind,
Yeah.
how we're supporting the chamber. So I would propose we take that off and have a discussion about the 5,000.
I would agree.
Yes,
But they're two different things, though.
they're two totally different things.
We're
They are.
I think we are 100% in support of an active and robust Chamber of Commerce. We're incredibly appreciative of what they do, right? I think I said,
Yeah.
I think we are.
I
Okay, so
will-
apologize, I didn't say
No,
that.
I'm
We always
there
take
with you,
those little
Chris.
liberties too often.
We're
And
waiting.
I think that we, as the board, the town, I think we did agree that we all should be a member of the Chamber of Commerce. So I want to look at those two things as separate, though.
Yeah.
Because, so, as far as the 5,000 to the, because that's not what, we're not paying $5,000 to help support the Chamber of Commerce. We're paying $5,000 for the Chamber of Commerce to operate
Yeah.
our visitor center.
That's fair. So is the action item on this one understanding if the chamber expects us to pay $825 as a member?
So this one's brand new, we've never paid the 825 before, so it is in the budget as presented, but it is brand new. So if you wanted to just talk about the 5,000, you actually leave it up here as you remove it from the budget. Does that make sense? It's in Maria's record.
In my opinion, is we're a member of the chamber, whether they ask for the contribution or not, we should make it, everyone else makes it, and if it's $825, let's make the contribution and then discuss the visitor center separate from that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
two different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So
That's
by
just my
pulling.
personal feeling.
Sure. So by pulling it off of here, that says that we are
Went up $825.
going to be paying.
Which is in the budget before you now already. So
Gotcha.
changing the- so
So it's not gonna,
Okay,
Let's take it out.
yeah. Great. It was like a double negative, so I was just having to.
yeah, that is. That's
You gotta watch these
confusing.
finance directors, they get a little
Okay.
shifty on these spreadsheets.
Melissa, we're counting on you to watch it.
So while we're on the right-hand side, I did want to have a conversation about the 60,000 for economic development that Chris had brought up previously, just to make sure we do our due diligence on this one. I personally feel that that there are gaps that $60,000 could potentially fill as we're putting together economic development strategy. If it was cut, though, it's not like we would be sitting here doing nothing on economic development. I think that we have a number of tactical activities that we could do over the next 9 months, 12 months, that would be very helpful to economic development. So I just wanted to sort of frame that as we just added 85 on the other side. What do folks think?
I think I don't think it's a bad idea for economic development, but I, going on what Chris said about, having a plan and, what are we gonna spend this money on and what is the benefit of what we're spending the money on? We haven't really done that yet.
Right.
So, I can see waiting on that.
Just to be clear, though, the 60,000 for the economic development studies in CNR, right? So we're paying cash for it or we're paying ourselves back over 5 years.
Right.
So if we take that out, we're not offsetting, we're not offsetting 60,000 in the budget.
Right.
And I mean,
But the same rationale applies. We still haven't really decided what we're gonna use it for.
So hypothetically, when we do figure out, let's say we do figure out, we do need $60,000, would there be a process in which we could request that from the Board of Finance when that time comes?
I would have to defer to Sean on that in terms of how requests for a supplemental appropriation has been handled here. I'm just not familiar with that process yet.
Sure, well, and it has changed in the new charter. There's a slightly higher threshold, or cap amount of a combined 2% of the operating budget. So ultimately, the Board of Selectmen makes the recommendation, and then that's forwarded to the Board of Finance. And again, so the only real limitation is if any one request cannot exceed 2%. And then in total, all the requests for a given year cannot exceed 3%.
that's
a large amount of
increase from prior year.
It'd have to be a really big number.
Because there used to be, there was a 1% for general appropriations, there was another emergency appropriation.
That's right.
Availability, and then there was a third one, right?
For the purchase or sale of property.
So So that's a substantial change. But from a practical standpoint, the Board of Finance has been less than pleased with us when we come in with known budgeted items off-cycle. So I would rather have it in our budget and ask for more because the study number changes than not ask for anything at all and then come back to them later and say, oh, by the way, we want 100 grand or we want 60 grand. They generally have not looked favorably upon us, and usually I'm the one that has to ask, so I would really like to not do it that way.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute, let me think this through now.
And having the $60,000 in the budget doesn't obligate us to spend it if we
No.
find that we don't need that much.
We would probably want to designate that one as one of the cash items versus one of the CNR items, right? Even though it's all within the CNR appropriation?
Right, they're currently all in the CNR appropriation, and so they're all.
It's up to the finance
But,
director.
right, but ultimately, that one would be included in the amount that we're proposing funding with cash in the first year. So I could designate that within the.
So respectfully for Thursday, could we just draw a line in the CNR schedule of this is real CNR and this is just cash CNR that we're
Cash
using
CNR.
CNR to approve it?
Yep, sure.
Just to clear that up for everybody?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So while we're on this side, before I move on, is there anything else that anyone would want to bring up as something to potentially take out? Okay.
I mean, comprehensively, as we look at this, I think, over the recent history, I think our prior first selectwomen and current administration have done a good job of addressing different staffing needs. I think we still do have staffing needs in other places and not saying that we don't, but, again, as we've had two discussions now, Chris, your question was fair, is this the highest priority? To me, it feels like it probably is, but again, we'll look for you to confirm that for us, but we have hired more plow drivers, we have hired more custodians, we have hired more police officers. Yes, we need to look at the finance department. We did solve part of the building department challenge last year. We worked with the school board on school resource officers, we worked with the school board on additional engineering staff. This board has gotten creative in a number of different ways to address staffing in an appropriate manner. And given what we've heard over the last few years and in this budget cycle, to me, I'm willing to stand up to the Board of Finance and say, we think that this is a priority, not, I don't think this is an addition to services. I think this is a delivery of basic services to this community. And if that ends up at a 4.3 or whatever it ends up, I think it's justifiable.
But, so as we look ahead to Thursday, because I want to make sure we're in a good position for that meeting, I think the two pieces that I would want to see, and I welcome others' input, is, telling the story of this budget is a little harder because of revaluation. And one of the things that I personally rubs me the wrong way is that, I understand that the value of some of our larger homes in town have gone down, and for very good reason. But the reality is that the people who are most able to pay are going to be seeing what could be a substantial tax decrease, and then people who are less able to pay will be seeing an increase. Not everybody, but some. And I want to make sure that we have a clear picture of those different buckets. So I think by home value, by percentage, so what percentage of our residents are in each bucket, and then approximately what would they see as far as an increase or decrease under this budget, just so we really understand what that picture looks like. And then the other piece is around what the cuts would look like to get to the 1.75. And appreciate the work that Maria and staff are doing. One other thing that she's going to be looking at are some of the recent service enhancements that other boards of selectmen have approved as potential things that we could discuss taking away, at least, in the discussion with the Board of Finances, these are the things that we've identified. We're not saying we support doing that, but these are the options, because I want to do a good faith effort in showing them what it would take to get to the guidance.
We just need to be very thoughtful with that, and I know we will be, but our budget is subject to line item by the Board of Finance. So if we give them an option, without respect to whether it's a good idea or not, they can cut it. So we just need to be very careful with what we go to them with. And I'm not suggesting we hide anything from them, but unlike the Board of Ed budget where they approve the total number, they can take out a person or a line item from our budget if they want to.
So Sean, what I would envision is, let's say we look at budget cuts and along the line of tonight, we decide to go with a recommendation of 3.89 or 4.2 or whatever, we can articulate that we've looked at what it would take to get to 1.75, and this is what we're recommending. We don't, in essence, have to submit fully as part of our recommendation those details.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's public record and everything, but, yeah.
Yeah, not trying to
Yeah.
hide anything, but again, we just, when we give them lists, sometimes it.
Sure.
We have to be
Yeah.
careful with what list we give them.
Yep.
Yeah, appreciate
Well,
that.
and they could do what they did last year and say, go back and cut $100,000 out, and that's how we got to that list that we were looking at before.
You're absolutely right. Generally, they
And
have-
that gives us the option to reintroduce our priorities for what services we want to provide or not. So I agree with Sean, we might want to be careful with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have been courteous to us before to they give us the number and we as a body decide, but, again, new members, new changes, new years, we just, always got to be careful what we present.
Is it customary that we, as a group, prioritize our capital items? Sort of when we go to the
If
Board of
asked.
Finance? Okay.
If we're
We have
asked.
done it, yeah.
I just want to,
It was particularly important in the last few years because we were looking at reducing
Right,
the item.
yep.
Yeah.
We're going the other way at this point.
yeah.
So we could certainly do it, but I think it might be an exercise at this point versus a necessity. So I think, perhaps talking to the chairman of the Board of Finance, but I get it. From your indications, it sounds like we're going back up to 6.3 or 6.4, as we advocated for last year, but they did ask us for a priority list because they wanted to come down.
Well, last year, we were considering moving major projects
Yeah.
out, which were very important to a large group of people. So we needed to have some clarity on what our priorities were, and we did that. We essentially had a list and a line, and everything above the line, everything below the line, and this is what we worked with. But last year was a very difficult year.
Yeah. Okay. Any other discussion on the budget before we
Well,
move on?
I would think, Eric, that we're going to, after the Board of Finance meets tomorrow night, that we'll have an inkling of, before we meet Thursday, what they're looking for. At least that's what I would hope they would give us, so that we don't go through our exercise on Thursday and then find out, well, now you got to do this.
They're doing the Board of
Right.
Ed tomorrow night, though, right?
Yeah, they're doing the Board of Ed, yeah.
Oh.
But I can certainly see that bringing the mill rate up to where we're talking about where we are. Certainly, I want to get ahead of your,
That's a good point.
Responsibilities for approving the budget, but certainly I'm sure you could come up, where are they now, where was it as proposed? Those are in the mill rate worksheet, and ready to be talked about. So I think that could certainly happen. And they too want to, evaluate the impact of the mill rate, and they haven't had that conversation. They'd asked for it, but some of that information on the bands and homes and the different value changes. And so they're going to be, I can see them talk about that tomorrow night as well.
Great. All right, thanks for the conversation. This is really good. Next up is the review of minutes. Anybody propose changes to the minutes from our last meeting? No? Okay, then they stand as presented. Under communications, the only item that was submitted was around the Eno Hall renovations, which are going to be beginning in the late spring. Is there any conversation around that item?
I appreciate the information.
Yeah, and I think, it's going to impact how people enter the building and where they park, and we'll obviously use the forms that we have to make sure that people are aware as time gets closer.
There's a lot of planning going on around that.
Yeah.
With the various departments involved. I think they're going to be ready for.
Okay. Good. Oh, and I think I skipped liaison and subcommittee reports.
did.
Oh, my goodness. Who had something to report here?
I always have something to report.
Yeah.
Well, we've mentioned several times the program on Wednesday night. Chris and I will be there to facilitate the program on the dangers of vaping, and we hope you will all attend, or attend with your children, or any other relevant parties. The other thing that we touched on briefly a couple of meetings ago was the 350th celebration. I have had the chance to have some conversations with people who would like to be involved in that. And as a result of that, I think it is time to call a meeting of those people who have contacted me. And so we are going to do that. It is my hope that it happens in time for us to have a table at the Volunteer Expo that we mentioned earlier in your first Selectmen's report, so that we give people an opportunity to sign up to volunteer for that if they so desire. So I think it's time to get the ball rolling. I've had some conversations with Melissa about getting a space on the town website for people to access if they would like to volunteer, along the lines of the volunteer form we already have through the town clerk's office. It is my intention that once this committee comes together, that I'm going to step back, and I'm just here to facilitate, so. The Historical Society has volunteered to let us use their space for this initial meeting, and then hopefully we will have some information going forward about the people who will be on part of the steering committee.
Great. Really appreciate the update. Sean?
Just a quick one, we have a public safety meeting on Thursday morning, if anybody would care to attend. I think we're gonna discuss a couple of the recent weather events in town, and if there's other business that the public would like to bring, there is an opportunity for public audience. Generally, folks don't come, but we, again, welcome, it's an open meeting.
Yeah.
And a good time to hear what's going on from a public safety standpoint. And also, the 17th is the High Holy Day, so please make sure that you're celebrating responsibly.
Celebrate safely, yeah.
But enjoying yourself out there. I like to think of it as my holiday.
It's all about Sean.
I am Sean Patrick,
It is all
so
about Sean.
I have a history of a green suit on that day as well, so you might want to catch me out at an establishment, so.
That's great.
Aaron, go.
Thank you, Sean.
Looking good there, laddie.
Anybody else with a subcommittee liaison?
There
Chris?
was,
Where's your green hat?
my green hat, no,
Don't you have
the Greeks, we don't look good in green.
Is there a Greek day?
There is, Greek Independence Day, matter
well,
of
there you
fact.
go.
I will certainly
Blue
pass
and
out
white,
flyers on
right?
that. No, I was gonna report the Parks and Rec, I did attend the meeting, but it was canceled, and I walked in on the recycling committee meeting, and realized I was in the wrong meeting, so I have no report.
Okay.
What happened with recycling?
Yeah, seriously.
Steal Mike's
Mike
thunder.
would have to
Oh,
fill it.
I didn't make the meeting.
So I've just got one thing. I'm liaison to the Economic Development Commission, which currently doesn't exist. So March 26th, our next meeting, I want to have that conversation about what a new EDC would look like. Also talking about the idea of economic development, strategic planning, as well as economic development projects that we can just do this year as a board. So we're not going to come to closure on those items on the 26th, but we're going to start the conversation in earnest. So,
Sounds good.
Okay.
good.
The one thing
Mike?
I'll add, Eric, is the Conservation Commission has met extensively over the past 3 or 4 months on the various forestry plans, and I understood that they came out with a recommendation or a nearly finished plan for the various open space properties. I haven't seen it yet because I was out of town, but I understood that they've been working really hard on it.
Great.
So it's very good stuff.
Great, thank you. Okay. With that, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.